The biting cold of the winter night seeped through the cracks of the secluded cabin, casting an icy shiver down Emily's spine. She sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the only source of warmth emanating from the crackling fireplace. The soft glow of the flames danced upon the walls, painting eerie shadows that seemed to come alive in the stillness of the night. As Emily watched the flickering images on the television screen, her thoughts drifted to her mother, Sarah. Tonight, like many other nights, Sarah had ventured out to her night shift job at the nearby hospital, leaving Emily to fend for herself in the desolate cabin. It was a routine they had grown accustomed to, but the solitude weighed heavy on Emily's young shoulders. Before Sarah had left, she had imparted a solemn warning to her daughter. "Emily," she had said, her voice laced with a mix of concern and urgency, "you must promise me that you will never open the door for anyone except me, no matter what." Emily had nodded in earnest, absorbing the weight of her mother's words. Now, as the minutes ticked away, Emily's attention wavered between the glow of the television and the haunting silence that enveloped the cabin. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind outside sent a shiver down her spine. She couldn't help but wonder what lurked beyond the walls of their secluded sanctuary. With every passing moment, the night grew colder and Emily's anxiety heightened. She clutched her hands tightly, her knuckles turning white. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to echo in her ears, a reminder of her mother's absence. Suddenly, a sharp, distinctive knock on the front door shattered the silence. Emily's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. The sound reverberated through the cabin, filling the air with an unsettling tension. Time seemed to stand still as she turned her gaze towards the door, its solid barrier the only thing shielding her from the unknown. Slowly, cautiously, Emily rose from the comfort of the couch and tiptoed towards the door. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out the hushed whispers of doubt that echoed in her mind. With trembling hands, she reached for the doorknob, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily mustered a trembling voice and whispered through the door, "Who is it?" The words hung in the frigid air, mingling with the weight of the unknown. But there was no response, just a deafening silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Reluctantly, Emily retreated from the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew, deep down, that it couldn't be her mother. Sarah wouldn't arrive until much later, after her night shift was complete. The realization sent a chill down Emily's spine, her mind racing with questions and a growing sense of unease. In that moment, as the echoes of the unanswered question lingered in the air, Emily felt a foreboding presence settle over the cabin. The night had just begun, and already the veil between the known and the unknown had been pierced. Little did she know that the events of this cold winter night would unravel a web of terror and test the limits of her courage and survival. The cabin stood in eerie silence, its walls seemingly holding their breath as Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The echoes of the unanswered question lingered in the air, mingling with her growing sense of unease. The chilling winter wind whispered through the cracks, adding an ominous undertone to the stillness of the night. Just as Emily thought the ordeal was over, a sudden and forceful knocking shattered the fragile peace. The sound reverberated through the cabin, each knock echoing in Emily's ears like a drumbeat of dread. Her pulse quickened, and she could feel a cold sweat forming on her forehead. Summoning her courage, Emily approached the door once more, her steps cautious and measured. She couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked beyond the wooden barrier. With trembling hands, she reached out, her fingertips grazing the rough texture of the door. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice quivering with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the steady rhythm of Emily's own breathing. But the knocking persisted, relentless and unforgiving. It seemed to grow louder and more urgent with each passing moment, as if demanding to be let in. Doubt gnawed at Emily's resolve, whispering haunting possibilities in her mind. Was it a stranger seeking refuge from the bitter cold, or something more sinister? The weight of her mother's words resonated in her thoughts, urging her to remain steadfast in her promise. Fear clutched at Emily's chest, but a flicker of curiosity burned within her. What if it was her mother, lost and confused? The uncertainty gnawed at her, tugging her towards the edge of the unknown. Reluctantly, Emily retreated from the door, her mind filled with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The knocking continued, unyielding in its persistence. She found herself torn between the desire for answers and the fear of the consequences. With each knock, the tension in the cabin mounted, stretching the very fabric of Emily's courage. The relentless rhythm seemed to seep into her bones, creating an unsettling symphony of dread. The walls closed in around her, and the once familiar cabin transformed into a labyrinth of uncertainty. As Emily stood in the dimly lit room, a battle raged within her. Should she succumb to the allure of the unknown, or hold fast to her mother's warning? The answer eluded her, lost in the haze of doubt and fear. In the midst of the turmoil, Emily made a decision. She would not succumb to the taunting knocks. She would remain resolute, protecting herself and the sanctity of their cabin. With each knock, her resolve grew stronger, fueled by the determination to keep her promise. And so, she retreated from the door, leaving the persistent knocking behind. The echoes of the unanswered question lingered in the air, but Emily knew that she had made the right choice. She settled back into the worn-out couch, her eyes fixated on the television screen, yet her ears attuned to the symphony of the night. The cabin remained cloaked in an unsettling silence, the echoes of the persistent knocking fading into the night. Emily's heart raced in her chest, her senses heightened as she grappled with the weight of uncertainty. The glow of the television flickered, casting eerie shadows upon the walls, as if mimicking the turmoil within Emily's mind. Time seemed to stretch as Emily sat alone, her eyes darting anxiously between the television screen and the clock on the wall. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in around her. Suddenly, the door knocked again that made Emily a bit nervous. "It can be Mom," she thought. She reached towards the door and asked, Who is there?" "It's me, my love," her mom replied. Her mom's voice made Emily a bit calm, and she opened the door. She gave a loving smile and entered in the home. Emily asked her mom that why has she arrived a half hour before than expected. Sarah replied, "Oh, my love, I was feeling tensed about you, so I thought to finish my work and come back to home as soon as possible." Emily felt happy and gave a loving smile towards her mom. Sarah told Emily that she has to go to bathroom to wash her face and closed the door of bathroom. Suddenly, a familiar sound pierced through the silence, jolting Emily from her thoughts. It was the ringtone of her mother's phone. A surge of adrenaline shot through her veins as she fumbled to answer the call. With trembling hands, she held the phone to her ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom." The voice that responded was filled with warmth and concern. "My love, I'll be a bit late from work. I'll arrive at 2 a.m., the voice said, sending a chill down Emily's spine. Dread washed over her as the realization hit her like a wave crashing upon the shore. The woman who had entered the home, posing as her mother, was an imposter. Her mother was still at work, unaware of the danger that loomed over her daughter. Panic welled up inside Emily. threatening to consume her. She struggled to catch her breath, her mind racing as she processed the gravity of the situation. The woman in the bathroom was not her mother, Sarah. She was a threat, a predator disguised as a familiar face. The cabin, once a place of solace, transformed into a haunting labyrinth. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, filled Emily with terror. She realized that the true danger lay just beyond the door, waiting to strike. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily made a decision that could determine her fate. With trembling hands, she rose from the couch and approached the door of bathroom, her heart pounding in her chest. The fear that gripped her was eclipsed by a fierce determination to protect herself and her mother. As she reached for the doorknob, a sense of foreboding washed over her. She knew that what lay on the other side would be a twisted reflection of her worst nightmares. But she couldn't afford to hesitate. With a deep breath, she turned the doorknob and swung the door open, revealing the true face of terror. The woman stood before her, her features contorted into a grotesque mask of decay. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of humanity, and her skin pale and mottled. She grinned, revealing rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. It was the face of a zombie, a creature that defied reason and belonged to the realm of nightmares. As the reality of the situation crashed down upon her, Emily's instincts kicked in. She screamed, piercing the night with her terror-stricken cry. It was a cry for help, a desperate plea that echoed through the darkness, hoping to reach someone who could save her from the clutches of the undead. Emily's scream echoed through the cabin, the sound reverberating off the walls, as if awakening the darkness itself. Time seemed to freeze as the zombie woman's wicked grin widened, relishing in the terror that consumed Emily's trembling form. With a surge of adrenaline, Emily's survival instincts kicked into overdrive. She knew she had to escape, to outrun the abomination that stood before her. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to fight or flee, and flight seemed the only option. Without a second thought, Emily turned on her heel and bolted toward the door, her heart pounding in her ears. Her surroundings blurred in a frenzied haze as fear fueled her movements, propelling her forward with desperate urgency. The zombie woman lunged after her, its decaying limbs contorting with unnatural speed. Emily's pulse quickened as she felt the creature's icy breath graze the back of her neck, its guttural growls filling the air. The predator was closing in, driven by a ravenous hunger for her flesh. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, Emily flung open the cabin door, the night air rushing to meet her as she stumbled into the darkness. She could hear the creature's manic laughter echoing behind her, taunting her with the knowledge that escape was fleeting. As Emily sprinted through the night, the moon cast a pale glow upon the desolate landscape. The world around her seemed distorted, her senses heightened to a fever pitch. Every rustling leaf, every gust of wind sent shivers down her spine, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Her legs burned with exertion, but she pushed herself onward, desperate to outrun the clutches of the undead predator. The chilling realization that her life hung in the balance fueled her determination, driving her to push beyond her physical limits. She could hear the creature's relentless pursuit behind her, its growls growing louder, closer. Panic threatened to consume her, but she refused to succumb. The will to survive burned bright within her, igniting a newfound strength and resolve. In the distance, a flicker of light pierced the darkness, a beacon of hope in the nightmarish landscape. Emily's heart soared as she recognized the approaching headlights of her mother's car. Relief washed over her, mingling with the renewed surge of determination. With a burst of energy, Emily pushed herself harder, her body screaming in protest. The gap between her and the pursuing undead monster narrowed, But she refused to let despair take hold. She clung to the hope of rescue, the promise of safety within her mother's embrace. As she reached the car, Emily threw herself through the open passenger door, her breath ragged and her body trembling. Her mother's eyes were wide with concern as she peeled away from the nightmare that had plagued their lives. In the rearview mirror, Emily caught a glimpse of the zombie woman, a grotesque silhouette fading into the distance. Though physically safe for now, the memory of the encounter lingered, etching a chilling reminder of the horrors they had faced. The car sped away from the horrors left behind, the headlights piercing through the darkness as Emily clung to her mother, seeking solace in her familiar embrace.